Yo, what's up, you guys? My name is Kevin Bacon, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to start a Vue Django project using Docker. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. For this project, I'm going to be using Django Cookie Cutter, which is basically a boilerplate project for any kind of Django project. There's two options. You can do the get up and running locally, or you can do it with Docker. We are going to be using the Docker the Docker version. So just so you know, you need to make sure that you have Docker installed. The Docker desktop, which is for Mac, Windows, or whatever you need. So make sure you get that installed, or it's not really going to work. All right. So in order to get started, let me just really quick go into my directory right here. And then I'm going to create a folder, and I'm just going to call it Vue_Django and go into that folder. Okay, so now I'm in my folder. So we actually aren't able to run this right here because we haven't installed Cookie Cutter. So I'm going to click this getting up and running locally, the one that's not Docker, and I'm going to create a virtual environment so that I can install Cookie Cutter. So you can see right here, we just have to run Python 3.11-m vim, and then the name of your virtual environment. I just call my vim. And if I ls, you can see that it's been created. Now we're going to actually activate our virtual environment by typing source vim bin activate. And once you hit enter, you can see on the left side of my terminal, the virtual environment is active. So from here, we can download the Cookie Cutter. So we're going to use pip to install Cookie Cutter. And once that's downloaded, then we can go ahead and get started back underneath the Docker area. We're going to create our Cookie Cutter project. Yes. All right, so now we're going to need a project name. Now this is going to be the backend, so we'll name it backend. The project slug, you can leave the same. A description if you'd like. Author name, Kevin Bacon. A domain name if you know that you're going to be deploying this to a certain domain. Your email. And any of this information that you feel like you need, you can go ahead and add that as well. The one thing that you do need to change for sure is use Docker is yes. Everything else, it's all up to you. A lot of times I will use Django REST framework because I like to have that set up so I can create APIs for my backend. But once that's all done, I'll ls and you can see that I have the backend. So just so you know that this works, I'll go ahead and cd into the backend. Oops, there. CD backend, and I'll go ahead and build my project, but I'm gonna do up-d-build. Just change that up a little bit. This will take a little bit of time the first time building it, and that is because it's got to create the containers. Now, just a quick note, this will not work if Docker Desktop is not running. So please make sure that it is up and running so that it can create the containers for you here. I'll be right back as soon as this is done because it will take a while. Okay, so that kind of took a while, but now you can see that under Docker Desktop, we do have our backend. It's got a couple different services. It's got our docs, the Postgres, which is the database, and then Django, which is the actual Django service. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. We don't really need it right now, and then I'm going to delete it so that we can also add. Well, I'll just leave it stopped for now, and we'll come back to that later. Okay, yeah, now I'll delete it. All right, cool. So next we need to create our front end. So I'm going to go out of this backend directory back into our root directory, and we're going to add Vue. I'm just going to use the Vue CLI here. You'll want to install this. You can use yarn or npm, whatever floats your boat, honestly. And then Vue create front end. Now there are different options. You can do manually select features, whatever you'd like. I already have a basic one set up, so I'm going to select that one. But just go ahead and tailor it to whatever your project needs are. Okay, so now that that is done loading, you can see that if I ls, you can see I have my front end and my back end. This will load completely fine, but right now we want to be able to load this with Docker, so we're going to go ahead and pull this up in VS Code. Okay, so I pulled up VS Code. I'm going to open up my Finder and find my project and just drag it into there. So now you can see I have my back end, my front end, and my virtual environment. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a Docker file and a Docker compose file. So here is my Docker file. And you'll want to add this in the root of this front end folder. Docker-compose.yaml. And your backend also has these things. They just have it separated in a different way. They have local and production, and then they've got their compose files here in local and production, which is not something you'll really need to worry about for now. But for deployment, you can change those, and you can just read the cookie cutter documentation to know how to do that. But back to Vue, anyways. So now we're going to go ahead and add something to our Docker file. I already have it pre-created in another file, so let me go get that. And by the way, you can build this Docker file however you like. It doesn't really matter. This is just a basic Docker file that I have already created, which is just using Node, put it in a working directory, copy all the packages.json, yarn install everything, yada, yada, yada. And then there is the Docker compose.yaml. And then we're going to add the Docker compose, which I gathered already from a different file. You can copy these, you can make your own, it doesn't really matter. I will be linking the repository to this in the description, so if you want to go ahead and look it up, copy it, you can there. All right, so now we've got our Docker compose and our Docker file. We should be able to run this in the terminal. So, okay, so if I cd into my front end and I Docker compose -d, then this should go ahead and create me a Vue UI. Okay, cool. So that was super fast. Again, we don't really need that right now, so I'm going to Docker compose down, and I'm going to go back into the root of our project directory. And now let's go ahead and create the Docker compose file to link these two services into one. It's super, super simple. So we're just going to create another Docker compose. All we're going to do here is we're going to include our versioning. And then we are going to include the Docker compose from our front end and the back end local.yaml from our Django. Now, obviously, if you were in production, you would change this to production, but we're just doing it local. Now, with all of those things put in place, this should work right now. If I Docker compose -d-build, this should create both the front end and the back end containers. And put them all inside of one container. So if I open up Docker Desktop, I can see I have my Vue Django container, and within it, I have all of my Django containers as well as my front-end UI. So these are all within the local host on ports 8080 and ports 8000. So this is 8080. I have my Vue app, and then on local host 8000. Oops. Okay, so it seems that there's an issue. Let me be right back and see what it was that I did wrong. Okay, so I'm back. I really don't know what happened. All I did was Docker compose down my container and then Docker composed it up, and I just rebuilt it again. I guess Postgres just wasn't loaded up properly, but it should work for you the first time. If it doesn't work, just go ahead and stop this and then rerun it, and it should rebuild the way that it did for me. So as you can see on localhost 8080, I've got the front end, and on the back end, I've got 8000. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Okay, so one more thing to note, there is a special command that you need to use in order to run commands for your Django backend. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like. And the reason for this is because we're not using a regular Django project. Well, we are in a sense, but because it's containerized, you have to run those commands within the Django container, if that makes sense. So I'm going to cd into the backend, and this is this is what we'll use to run our Django commands. You will use docker compose run --rm Django manage /manage.py. This is a super long command, but if you want to create an alias for it, which is what I did, then that's pretty helpful. So like for example, if I wanted to make migrations, you can see it will create a container really quickly and then delete it. If you want to know how to make an alias for this, so that you can just do like what I do, which is pmpy, and then I just say migrate like that. It's super quick, super easy, super fast. Just go ahead and look up how to make an alias for whatever operating system you have, and you can basically shorten this into whatever command that you want. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As I mentioned before, I will be putting this up in a Git repository for everyone to be able to use and see. You can copy this, you can clone the repo, use that to start your own project, or you can do it all from scratch if you want. It doesn't matter. But yeah, hopefully this helped, and good luck on your dev projects.